Jake had always been the kind of guy who noticed details. It came with being a programmer. You learn to spot when something doesn't look right. So when he walked into his apartment that Tuesday evening and felt like something was off, he trusted his gut. The living room looked exactly the same. His laptop was still on the coffee table where he left it. The stack of takeout menus sat undisturbed by the door, but something felt different. The air seemed to carry a faint sweetness, like flowers he couldn't name. His couch pillow was positioned slightly differently than he remembered. Jake shook his head and laughed at himself. Maybe he was working too many late nights. Debugging code until 2 a.m. was probably messing with his brain. He grabbed a beer from the fridge and settled in for another evening of Netflix and leftover pizza. But the feeling wouldn't go away. Over the next few days, tiny things kept bothering him. His coffee maker was warm one morning, even though he distinctly remembered not making coffee before bed. A book on his nightstand was bookmarked at a different page. His bathroom window was cracked open when he always kept it closed. "You're losing it, man," he told his reflection while brushing his teeth. "Nobody's breaking in to make coffee and read your books." That's when he met her. Jake was struggling with 3 bags of groceries and trying to fish his keys from his pocket when she appeared in the hallway. She moved so quietly he hadn't heard her coming. One moment he was alone. The next she was standing there like she materialized from thin air. "You need help with that?" she asked, and her voice had this musical quality that made him look up. She was beautiful in a way that made him forget what he was going to say. Pale skin that seemed to glow under the hallway's dim lighting. Hair so dark it looked almost blue-black. But it was her eyes that really got him. They were this incredible violet color he'd never seen before. Not quite blue, not quite purple. "I'm Elena," she said, extending a delicate hand to help steady his grocery bags. "I just moved into apartment 3B. Jake, 3C. He managed to get his keys out without dropping everything. "Welcome to the building. It's pretty quiet around here. Quiet is good," she said with a small smile. "I prefer quiet." Her accent was subtle, but definitely there. European, maybe. He couldn't place it exactly. There was something formal about how she spoke, like English wasn't her first language, but she'd learned it very well. "Where are you from?" he asked, genuine curiosity mixing with attraction. "Oh, very small country in Eastern Europe. You probably never heard of it," she waved her hand dismissively. "I work as translator now. Remote work, you know." Jake nodded, though something about her answer felt rehearsed. "That's cool. What languages?" For just a second, Elena looked uncertain. "Many languages. Slavic mostly. Some others." Before he could ask more, she was already backing toward her door. "I should let you put away your groceries before ice cream melts. Nice meeting you, Jake." And just like that, she was gone, disappearing into her apartment so quickly he wondered if he'd imagined the whole conversation. But he hadn't imagined that perfume, the same sweet floral scent he'd been noticing in his apartment. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Elena's unusual eyes and the way she'd seemed to glide rather than walk. There was something otherworldly about her, like she didn't quite belong in their ordinary apartment building with its beige walls and fluorescent lighting. Around midnight, he heard soft footsteps in the hallway. They paused outside his door, and he held his breath. The footsteps continued, but they seemed to stop at Elena's apartment and then silence. Jake crept to his window and peeked through the blinds. Elena's apartment was dark, no sign of movement. But he could swear he saw a faint light, almost like starlight, flickering behind her curtains. The next morning, his paranoia kicked into high gear. The weird incidents in his apartment weren't random. Someone was definitely getting in. But how? He checked every window, every lock, everything was secure. His building had decent security, and you needed a key card to get into the main entrance. Jake decided to take action. He ordered a small security camera online and set it up facing his front door. If someone was getting in, he'd catch them on video. But the strangest thing happened. Every time something odd occurred in his apartment, a moved object, that sweet scent in the air, his coffee maker mysteriously warm, the camera footage would be corrupted. just static or a black screen during those exact time periods. It was like whoever was doing this knew exactly how to avoid being recorded. Elena started showing up at the most convenient times. When he was struggling with his broken printer, she knocked on his door offering to help. When he was cooking dinner and realized he was out of salt, there she was in the hallway asking if he had any sugar to spare. "You cook a lot," she asked, standing in his doorway and looking around his apartment with curious eyes. "Not really. Mostly just basic stuff." Jake noticed how she seemed to study everything. His furniture, his electronics, even the way he organized his kitchen. I am still learning," Elena said. "American food is different. Everything comes in boxes and cans. Very interesting." She picked up his TV remote and examined it like she'd never seen one before. So many buttons. "What does this one do?" Jake showed her how to change channels, and Elena watched the screen with fascination. Like television was some amazing new technology instead of something that had existed her whole life. "Where exactly are you from?" Jake asked again. "I mean, even small countries have TV, right?" Elena set down the remote quickly. "Of course, we just prefer books, reading, old ways." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I should go. Thank you for sugar." As she left, Jake realized he'd never actually given her any sugar, and she'd never asked for any specific amount or brought a container to put it in. That night, Jake lay in bed staring at the ceiling. He was either dealing with the world's strangest burglar, or his beautiful new neighbor was hiding something big. Either way, he was pretty sure his quiet, predictable life was about to get a lot more complicated. The last thing he remembered before falling asleep was the faint sound of his front door opening and closing, followed by soft footsteps moving through his apartment. But instead of feeling scared, he felt oddly comforted, like someone was watching over him while he slept. Jake started waking up at weird times, not because of noise or nightmares, but because he could feel someone watching him. It was the strangest sensation, like when you're in a crowded room and suddenly know someone's staring at you from across the space. The first time it happened, he figured it was just his imagination. He'd been stressed about work, dealing with a difficult client who kept changing requirements for their app. Stress could mess with your sleep, make you paranoid. That made sense. But it kept happening. Night after night, Jake would drift off normally, then suddenly snap awake around 2 or 3 a.m. with his heart racing. The room would feel different, charged with some kind of energy he couldn't explain. He'd look around, see nothing unusual, and eventually fall back asleep. Then one night, he noticed his bedroom window was open. Jake always slept with the window closed, always. He lived on the 3rd floor, and the alley behind the building was sketchy enough during the day. At night, keeping that window locked was just common sense, but there it was, cracked open about 2 inches, letting in the cool night air. He got up to close it and froze. In the dim light from the street lamp below, he could see footprints on the fire escape outside his window, small footprints, like someone wearing delicate shoes. Jake's hand shook as he locked the window and double-checked it. Someone had actually been on his fire escape. Someone had opened his window from the outside. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was real. The next morning, he called his landlord about getting better locks, maybe security bars for the window. But Mr. Peterson just laughed it off. 3rd floor. Nobody's climbing up there. Son, you probably opened it yourself and forgot. Happens to me all the time. But Jake knew he hadn't opened it. He was absolutely certain. That evening, Elena knocked on his door around dinner time. She was holding a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I hope you don't mind," she said, "but I made too much tea. Traditional blend from my country. Very good for sleep and relaxation." Jake took the package, and it smelled incredible, like lavender mixed with something he couldn't identify. Something that reminded him of starlit nights and mountain air. "That's really thoughtful. Thank you." Elena smiled, but she seemed nervous. "You look tired, Jake." "Not sleeping well." It was an innocent question, but something about the way she asked it made him pause. How would she know he wasn't sleeping? "Well," he barely knew her. "Just work stuff," he said. You know how it is. Yes, Elena nodded. Work can be very consuming. Sometimes we need help switching off our minds. After she left, Jake brewed a cup of the tea. It was the most delicious thing he'd ever tasted, and within minutes he felt incredibly relaxed. That night, he slept deeper than he had in weeks, but he also had the most vivid dreams. In his dream, someone was sitting in the chair by his window, a figure silhouetted against the moonlight, just watching him sleep with what felt like genuine care. The presence wasn't threatening, it felt protective, almost loving. When he tried to focus on who it was, the dream would shift. But the feeling of being watched over stayed with him. Jake woke up feeling more rested than he had in months. The tea was clearly some kind of herbal miracle. But something bothered him about the dream. It had felt too real, too specific. He decided to test something. That night, Jake pretended to fall asleep but stayed partially awake, listening. Around 2 a.m., he heard the soft sound of his window opening. His heart started pounding, but he forced himself to stay still and keep his breathing steady. Footsteps whispered across his bedroom floor. Someone was definitely in his room. Through barely open eyes, Jake could see a figure settling into the chair by his window. The same chair from his dreams. The person was small and moved with incredible grace, like they were floating rather than walking. It was Elena. She sat there for what felt like hours, just watching him sleep. Not in a creepy way, more like she was studying him, trying to understand something. Occasionally she would tilt her head or lean forward slightly, as if fascinated by some detail of how he breathed or moved in his sleep. Jake's mind raced. This was crazy. His neighbor was breaking into his apartment to watch him sleep. He should be terrified, should be calling the police. But somehow, he felt completely safe. There was something so gentle about her presence, so careful and respectful. Elena never touched anything, never moved from that chair. She just sat there like she was keeping watch over him. As dawn started to lighten the sky, Elena stood up and moved toward the window. Jake kept his eyes mostly closed but watched as she paused at the foot of his bed. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something or do something. But then she shook her head and continued to the window. She climbed out onto the fire escape with the skill of someone who'd done it many times before, closing the window carefully behind her. Jake lay there in the growing daylight, trying to process what he'd witnessed. Elena was definitely the one who'd been entering his apartment. But why? What was she looking for? And why did her presence make him feel so calm, instead of violated? The next evening, Elena appeared in the hallway again as Jake was coming home from work. "How did you sleep?" she asked, and there was something in her eyes that suggested she already knew the answer. "Really well, actually. That tea you gave me is amazing." Elena looked pleased. "I'm glad it helps. Sometimes people need assistance to find peaceful rest." "Elena," Jake said carefully, "can I ask you something?" She tensed slightly. "Of course. Do you ever have trouble sleeping? I mean, you're up pretty late sometimes." "I hear footsteps in the hall. I keep unusual hours," Elena admitted. "Sleep is difficult for me sometimes. I prefer nighttime. Everything is quieter then, more peaceful." Jake nodded, studying her face. She was telling him something without really telling him. There were layers to Elena that he was only beginning to glimpse. "If you ever want to talk," he said, "instead of just wandering the halls at night, my door is always open." Elena's violet eyes widened, and for a second Jake thought she might actually explain everything. But then she smiled that mysterious smile and shook her head. "You are very kind, Jake, but some things are better left in the darkness where they belong." As she disappeared into her apartment, Jake realized that Elena wasn't just his mysterious neighbor anymore. She was becoming something much more complicated and much more dangerous to his heart. Jake found himself looking forward to Elena's midnight visits. He knew it was crazy. Normal people would call the police if someone kept breaking into their apartment. But there was nothing normal about how Elena made him feel. He started leaving. His window unlocked on purpose. Their strange relationship developed its own rhythm. Elena would appear in his room around 2 a.m., settle into the chair by his window, and watch over him while he slept. Sometimes Jake would pretend to be asleep and listen to her soft breathing. Other times, he'd give up the pretense and they'd talk quietly in the darkness. "Why do you do this?" he asked her one night. Elena was silent for so long he thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "You sleep so peacefully. I have never seen anything like it. Where I come from, peaceful sleep is rare." "Where exactly do you come from, Elena? And don't give me that small country story again." She laughed softly. "You are very persistent." "I'm a programmer. I don't like unsolved puzzles." Elena stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the stars. In the moonlight, her pale skin seemed to glow with its own inner light. "Have you ever felt like you don't belong anywhere?" she asked. "Like you are visiting a world that follows rules you don't understand?" Jake sat up in bed. "Everyone feels like that sometimes." "No," Elena shook her head. "Not sometimes, always. Every conversation, every interaction, every simple task that others take for granted. Like you are an actor who forgot their lines in a play everyone else memorized." There was such sadness in her voice that Jake wanted to get up and comfort her. But something told him to stay where he was, to let her talk. "I watch you sleep because it is the only time I see someone completely at peace with existing. You don't question whether you belong here. You just are." Over the next few weeks, Jake started learning more about Elena during their midnight conversations. She knew incredible things about science and astronomy, could explain complex theories about physics and space travel that he'd never heard of. But she struggled with basic human interactions. "Your neighbor Mrs. Chen smiled at me today," Elena told him one night. "I didn't know how to respond. Where I come from, strangers do not show their teeth to each other. It's just being friendly," Jake explained. "When someone smiles at you, you smile back." Elena practiced smiling, and it was both adorable and heartbreaking, like she was learning to be human from scratch. During the day, Jake found himself researching everything he could about Elena. He tried searching for her name online, nothing. No social media profiles, no work history, no public records. It was like she didn't exist before moving into apartment 3B. He checked with the building management, claiming he needed to contact his neighbor about a noise issue. The manager told him Elena had paid her entire lease upfront in cash and provided minimal references. "Weird lady," the manager said. "Beautiful, but weird. Always asking strange questions about the building, like she's never lived in an apartment before." Jake started paying attention to Elena's apartment. At night, he could see unusual lights through her windows. Not electric lights, but something that pulsed and shifted like aurora borealis. Sometimes he heard sounds that didn't make sense, like wind chimes when there was no wind, or music played on instruments he couldn't identify. One evening, Elena invited him over for dinner. Her apartment was unlike anything he'd ever seen. The furniture was minimal and seemed to be made from materials he couldn't identify. Wood that looked like it grew in spirals. Metal that shifted color depending on the angle of light. The walls were covered with what looked like star charts, but the constellations were wrong. Jake had taken enough astronomy classes to recognize major star patterns, and these weren't from Earth's night sky. "These are beautiful," he said, studying one of the charts. "Where are they from?" "Home," Elena said simply, then quickly busied herself in the kitchen. The meal was incredible, flavors he'd never experienced, combinations that shouldn't have worked but were absolutely delicious. But what struck him most was watching Elena eat. She approached each bite like it was a fascinating experiment, as if she was still learning how taste worked. "Elena," Jake said carefully, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." She tensed. "What? Are you in some kind of trouble? Running from something? Because if you are, maybe I can help." Elena set down her fork and stared at him for a long moment. "You want to help me? Of course. I care about you." The words surprised him as much as they seemed to surprise her. When had that happened? When had this strange, midnight relationship become something he couldn't imagine? Living without Jake, Elena said softly, "What if I told you that helping me could put you in danger?" "What kind of danger?" Elena stood up and began pacing around the room. There are people looking for me, people who want to study me, control me. If they knew I was developing feelings for someone like you, they would see you as a weakness to exploit. Someone like me, someone normal, someone who belongs in this world. Jake reached for her hand, and when their fingers touched, he felt a small electric shock. Not painful, but definitely there. Elena, whatever's going on, whatever you're dealing with, you don't have to handle it alone. She pulled her hand away, but not before he felt how cold her skin was. Not just cool, actually cold. Like she'd been standing outside in winter. You don't understand, Elena said. I can't. She stopped mid-sentence and looked toward the window with sudden alarm. They're here, she whispered. Who's here? Elena moved to the window and peered through the curtains. Down in the street, Jake could see two figures in dark suits standing beside a black sedan. Looking up at their building, I have to go, Elena said, suddenly frantic. Tonight, right now. Wait, what? Go where? But Elena was already gathering items from around her apartment, the star charts, some books written in scripts he didn't recognize, and a small device that looked like a cross between a smartphone and a compass. Elena, talk to me. What's happening? She paused at her door, looking back at him with those incredible violet eyes. Jake, these past few weeks, watching you sleep, talking with you, learning about your world, it has been the most wonderful experience of my life. But I cannot stay. It is not safe for either of us. Then let me come with you. Elena shook her head. Where I go, you cannot follow. We are too different. I see that now. She kissed his forehead gently, and her lips felt like cool starlight against his skin. Thank you for showing me what peaceful sleep looks like. I will carry that memory with me always. And then she was gone, leaving Jake standing in an empty apartment that still smelled like flowers and starlight, wondering if he'd just imagined the most beautiful relationship of his life. Jake couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything. Elena had been gone for 3 days, and her apartment stood empty. The building manager said she'd left no forwarding address, just handed over her keys and disappeared. But Jake couldn't accept that it was over. Not when he finally found someone who made him feel truly alive. He started researching obsessively, trying to find any trace of Elena online. He searched through immigration records, looked up translation services, even checked missing person databases. Nothing. It was like she'd never existed. On the 4th night, Jake was sitting in his bedroom chair, the same chair Elena used to occupy, when he heard a soft tapping at his window. His heart jumped. Elena was back, but when he opened the window, it wasn't Elena climbing through. It was a man about his age with sandy hair and kind eyes. He moved with the same fluid grace Elena had, and his skin had that same pale, almost luminescent quality. Please, don't be afraid, the man said quietly. My name is David. I'm Elena's friend. Where is she? Jake demanded. What happened to her? David settled into the chair, mimicking Elena's habit of sitting by the window. She's safe, but she's in a lot of trouble because of what happened between you two. What kind of trouble? David studied Jake's face carefully, like he was deciding how much to reveal. Jake, what do you know about genetic conditions that affect brain development? The question caught Jake off guard. Not much. Why? There are people in this world who are born different, not disabled, not sick, just different. Their brains work in ways that give them abilities most humans don't have, but also make it very hard for them to fit into normal society. Jake sat down on his bed, trying to process this. Elena has some kind of medical condition? Elena and people like her can process information at incredible speeds. They can see patterns. Others understand complex systems intuitively, but social interaction, emotional connections, basic daily routines, these things don't come naturally to them. David paused, watching Jake's reaction. For most of Elena's life, she lived in a specialized community with others like her. They had their own ways of communicating, their own social structures. She never learned how to navigate the regular world. Then why did she leave? Because she wanted to understand how normal people live. She was curious about things like friendship, love, what it feels like to belong somewhere without having to pretend you're something you're not. Jake thought about Elena's strange questions, her fascination with everyday objects, the way she seemed to study his every movement. She was studying me, he said. David nodded. At first, yes, but something unexpected happened. Elena started developing genuine feelings for you. That's never happened before. Not for any of our people. Our people, there are about 200 of us scattered around the world. We stay hidden because most of society wouldn't understand what we are. They want to study us, control us, or worse. Jake remembered the men in suits outside Elena's building. The people who were looking for her. They're from your community? No, David said grimly. They're from a research organization that's been trying to locate our community for years. Someone leaked information about Elena's location. Jake felt sick because she was spending time with me, because she was displaying emotions and behaviors they'd never seen before. Elena was supposed to observe and report back, but instead she started acting more human. That made her valuable to people who want to understand how our brains work. David leaned forward. Jake, I need you to understand something. Elena didn't just care about you. She was changing because of you, learning to feel things she'd never felt before. For someone like Elena, that's both miraculous and terrifying. Where is she now? Back with our community. But she's not the same. She keeps asking about you, wondering if you're okay. She barely sleeps, which is saying something for people who already sleep very little. Jake stood up and started pacing. I don't care what kind of condition she has. I don't care if she's different. I want to see her. That's not possible. Why? Not. David was quiet for a long moment. Because our community leaders think Elena's attachment to you is dangerous. They believe emotional connections make us vulnerable, easier to track and capture. That's ridiculous, is it? David asked. Elena exposed herself to danger because she wanted to be near you. She broke protocols, ignored safety measures, all because of feelings she didn't understand. From their perspective, emotions are a weakness. Jake sat back down, feeling defeated. So what happens now? Elena asked me to come here. She wanted you to know the truth about what she is, why she had to leave. She didn't want you to think she abandoned you by choice, but she did choose to leave. David shook his head. She chose to protect you. If she'd stayed, those research people would have eventually figured out how important you are to her. They would have used you to get to her. Jake felt a surge of anger. Don't I get a say in that decision? Maybe I would have been willing to take that risk. That's exactly what Elena was afraid of, David said softly. She knows you would have tried to protect her, even if it meant putting yourself in danger. She couldn't live with that. They sat in silence for a while, both looking out the window at the night sky. Finally, Jake spoke. David, can I ask you something? Are you like Elena? Do you have the same condition? David smiled sadly. Yes, but I've never experienced what Elena did with you. None of us have. She's the first of our people to form a genuine emotional bond with someone from the outside world. What does that mean? It means Elena is evolving in ways we don't understand. She's becoming something new, part of our world, but also part of yours. Jake looked at David with sudden hope. Then maybe there's a way for her to have both. Maybe she doesn't have to choose. David met his eyes, and for the first time that evening, he looked hopeful too. Maybe. But it would require Elena to be braver than anyone in our community has ever been before. Elena is the bravest person I've ever met, Jake said without hesitation. David stood up and moved toward the window. I'll tell her you said that. It might make the difference. As David prepared to leave, Jake grabbed his arm. Wait, tell Elena something else for me. What? Tell her that her chair by the window is still waiting for her. Tell her I'll leave it empty until she's ready to come home. David smiled, the first genuine smile Jake had seen from him all evening. I'll tell her. And Jake, don't give up. Hope Elena's story isn't over yet. After David left, Jake sat in Elena's chair and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Elena was looking at the same sky, hopefully thinking about him. He just had to trust that their connection was strong enough to overcome whatever obstacles stood between them. 2 weeks passed with no word from Elena or David. Jake threw himself into work during the day and spent his evenings researching everything he could find about unusual neurological conditions in hidden communities. He learned about people with extraordinary pattern recognition abilities, individuals who process sensory information differently, and groups throughout history who had lived separately from mainstream society. The more he read, the more Elena's behavior made sense. But research couldn't fill the empty space she'd left behind. Jake was debugging code late one Thursday night when he heard the familiar soft tapping at his window. His heart raced as he opened it, hoping to see Elena's face. Instead, it was David again, but this time he wasn't alone. A woman about Elena's age climbed through after him, moving with that same otherworldly grace. "Jake, this is Maya," David said. "She's one of our community leaders." Maya studied Jake with intense curiosity. She had the same pale skin and unusual eyes as Elena and David, but where Elena's eyes were violet, Maya's were a striking silver color. "So you are the one who changed Elena?" Maya said. Her voice had a formal quality, like she was used to being in charge. "I didn't try to change her," Jake said defensively. "I just cared about her." "That is exactly what changed her," Maya replied. "For 26 years, Elena functioned according to our community's expectations. Then she spent a few weeks with you, and suddenly she is experiencing emotions we do not understand." Jake looked between Maya and David. "Is that a bad thing?" "We thought so," Maya admitted. "Emotions seemed like a complication that would make Elena vulnerable, but we may have been wrong." David stepped forward. "Jake, something happened after Elena returned to our community. She started helping other members in ways she never had before." "What do you mean?" Maya answered. "Elena always had strong analytical abilities, but now she also has something we call emotional intelligence. She can understand what people need, not just what they think they need." Jake sat down, trying to process this. "You're saying Elena becoming more human made her better at helping your people?" "Exactly," David said. "She's been working with community members who struggle with basic social interactions, teaching them things she learned from watching you." Maya moved to the window and looked out at the city lights. "We have always believed that emotional connections made us weaker. Elena is proving that they might actually make us stronger." "Where is Elena now?" Jake asked. "That is complicated." Maya said, "Our community voted on whether to allow Elena to maintain contact with you. The decision was close, but they voted yes." Jake's heart jumped. "They voted yes, with conditions." Maya continued, "Elena would need to be completely honest with you about what she is and what being with her would mean for your life." David smiled. Elena's response was that she couldn't be honest with you until she was honest with herself first. Jake frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," said a familiar voice from the window, "that I needed to figure out who I really am before I could ask you to accept me." Elena climbed through the window, and Jake's breath caught. She looked different, more confident somehow, more comfortable in her own skin. Her violet eyes were brighter, and when she smiled, it reached every part of her face. "Hello, Jake," she said softly. Jake wanted to rush to her, hold her, tell her how much he missed her. But something in her posture told him to wait, to let her speak first. "I owe you an explanation," Elena said, "a real one this time." Maya and David quietly moved toward the window. "We will leave you two alone," Maya said. "Elena knows how to contact us when she is ready." After they left, Elena sat in her chair by the window, the chair Jake had kept empty for her. "I was born with a neurological condition that affects how my brain processes information," she began. "People like me can solve complex problems quickly, but we struggle with emotional connections and social situations." Jake nodded. "David told me some of this. What David could not tell you is how scared I was when I started having feelings for you. For my entire life, emotions were something other people had. I understood them intellectually, but never felt them myself." Elena looked out at the stars. "When I started caring about you, it was like discovering a whole new sense. Like suddenly, Being able to see colors when you had only seen black and white before. Elena, I don't care what condition you have. It doesn't change how I feel about you. She turned to look at him. That is exactly what terrifies our community leaders. You accept me without understanding what being with me really means. Then help me understand. Elena stood up and began pacing, just like she had the night she left. Jake, I will always be different from other people. I do not process social situations the same way you do. I ask strange questions. I notice details others miss, and sometimes I need space to be alone with my thoughts. Jake smiled. Elena, everyone needs space sometimes. Everyone's different in their own ways. But I am different in ways that could put you in danger. There are organizations that want to study people like me. Being close to me means being part of that risk. Jake stood up and moved closer to her. Remember when you asked me if I'd ever felt like I didn't belong anywhere? Elena nodded. Double quotes. Well, I felt like I belonged somewhere the moment I met you. Not because you're normal or ordinary, but because you're you. Your questions, your curiosity, the way you see the world, it all makes perfect sense to me. Elena's eyes filled with tears, the first time Jake had ever seen her cry. There is something else, she said. If we are together, really together, you would need to meet my community. You would need to understand the full scope of what we are and how we live. Jake took her hands. They were still surprisingly cold, but now he found that comforting rather than strange. Elena, I've spent the last month learning everything I could about neurological differences in hidden communities. I know this won't be simple or ordinary, but I also know that what we have is worth fighting for. Elena searched his face. You really mean that? I mean it completely. Elena stepped closer to him. Then I have a proposition for you. What kind of proposition? Come with me tomorrow night. Meet some of my community. See what my world is really like. If you still want to be part of my life after that, then we figure out how to make this work. Jake didn't hesitate. Yes, Elena smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise. Jake, yeah? Can I stay here tonight? I have missed watching you. Sleep. Jake laughed and gestured toward her chair. It's all yours. As Elena settled into her familiar spot by the window, Jake realized that their story was just beginning. It wouldn't be simple, and it wouldn't be ordinary. But as he drifted off to sleep with Elena watching over him, Jake knew he had found something worth any challenge they might face for the first time in weeks. Both Jake and Elena slept peacefully, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together.